A Black Lives Matter extremist tried cutting the brakes on an NYPD vehicle in mid-July, and he was arrested. Now we're learning that not only was he caught due to an informant, a paid informant, but that the feds are getting involved, and this, to me, looks like the federal government, they're seriously dropping the hammer. Now, I don't know if you guys saw the IRL podcast show we did the other night talking about Jake Paul. You may have heard the news about Jake Paul. Many of you probably don't care, and I mean this with all due respect. That's not my world. I'm not super concerned about vloggers and stuff. But apparently the feds raided his home partly due to his involvement, or I believe it was due to his involvement in the Black Lives Matter riots in Arizona. They also raided the apartments of, his home. They raided the home of one of his friends or something like that. Now, I don't know exactly all the details on the Jake Paul thing, but this story is interesting because it was a dude in New York, part of the Occupy, New York protests or whatever, was talking about how he wanted to hurt cops, tried cutting the brake lines. But now the feds are getting involved. And my general understanding of why, now listen, here's what you got to understand. The FBI gets involved when federal crimes are committed. So if someone crosses state lines to commit a crime, the FBI can get involved. That's probably how, to the best of my understanding, it's probably how the feds are getting involved in the destruction of statues and federal property. A lot of these Antifa types will travel across state lines. Well, in the affidavit from, I believe it's from the feds, they just basically say that the New York Police Department travels across state lines in their vehicles. Therefore, basically, this dude's getting an upgrade from a local criminal mischief charge to a federal charge. Now, they don't say exactly what he's being charged with, but he will now face up to 20 years in prison. It's crazy stuff, man. This says to me, the DOJ, they're not messing around. They want everyone to know you will be locked up. So let me just say to all the people that were going out and acting a fool and still are, you're going to regret it. And you're going to be crying in a prison cell for years because they're coming for you. Check a story out. The Daily Mail says, revealed, paid NYPD informant drove protester who cut brake line on a police van to look for targets and went with him to take reconnaissance photos of the Verrazano Bridge after he said he wanted to destroy it. Now, I will first and foremost point out, I do not like the idea that informants will provide resources. The FBI does this kind of stuff all the time. In this instance, it was the NYPD. You give someone the means to commit a crime. I don't like that. It's not really entrapment. People don't know what entrapment is. Entrapment is when you coerce someone into doing something. So if the informant told him, if you don't do this, I will, negatively impact you in a certain way, harm someone you love, or, destroy your life, that would be entrapment. In this instance, being like, yeah, I'll drive you around, whatever you want to do, buddy. That's not. Daily Mail says, the Black Lives Matter, they say protester, I'm going to say extremist, who is charged with cutting the brake lines on a marked NYPD van, made threats to attack the Verrazano Bridge and was caught with the assistance of a paid police informant, it has been revealed. Jeremy A. Trapp, 24, was arrested on federal criminal charges at his home in Brooklyn on Wednesday in relation to the July 17th attack on an NYPD van in the Sunset Park neighborhood. In a newly unsealed criminal complaint, FBI investigators revealed that Trapp first met with the NYPD informant at a demonstration outside the Brooklyn Criminal Court in downtown Brooklyn. Trapp told the confidential informant that the police were racist, that he wanted to harm officers and their supporters, and that he had previously been involved in destroying property and burning a police car, wrote FBI Special Agent David J. Williams in the complaint. I do have it, and we'll go through this a little bit after I read the story. They say, over the next several days, Trapp remained in contact with the informant, and the two met up on July 15th. On that occasion, Trapp allegedly said that he wanted to burn the Verrazano Bridge down so that white supremacists could not use it to get to Brooklyn from Staten Island. Is he insane? Yes, because regular people use this bridge. The Verrazano Bridge is the longest suspension bridge in America and connects Staten Island with the Bay Ridge section of Brooklyn. The following day, Trapp and the informant drove to the Brooklyn side of the Verrazano Bridge, where Trapp took reconnaissance photos on the bridge. Dude, this is above and beyond, man. This dude was talking about extreme acts of terror, targeting a critical infrastructure and a bridge. Now, he only got arrested because of cutting these brake lines, but man, throughout, the informant says that Trapp spoke of his desire to harm police, saying that burning cop cars was not enough and that police stations needed to be burned instead, and the brake lines on police vehicles cut. All right, let's stop for a second. What this man is saying is not unique to him. I have heard, these activists talk about crazy stuff. Now, this is certainly the craziest I've directly heard, but I've heard people talk about, look, these far leftists are very careful in how they explain how they explain things and who they're willing to talk to. I always tell people, because they're like, Tim, call him out. Andy No does. Okay? Andy No. Follow him on Twitter. Andy NGO. He'll give you all the lists. I'll show you all the videos. I follow him. I use his, I track his work for, sourcing and stuff like that. Andy knows what he's talking about. He follows this stuff, and he will show you exactly what they're doing, what they're saying, and he'll show you all the public reports on when they're arrested and things like that. But I'll tell you what, in my time, I've heard many of these people talk about escalation, violence, and their plans. They want to burn everything down. We're learning this because of a paid informant, a confidential informant. They say Trapp complained that the demonstrations were too nonviolent and were not accomplishing anything. After failing to spot any unattended vehicles on July 16th, Trapp and the informant met up again on July 17th and again scouted Brooklyn. Now, what would be the point of cutting the brake lines on one vehicle? You might hurt a small handful of officers, I suppose. It just seems random and stupid, insane, to be honest. Trapp showed off a scissor-like tool that could be used to sever brake lines, the informant said. And the two began driving around Brooklyn, but unbeknownst to Trapp, an undercover NYPD surveillance team was tailing them. At around 4 p.m., Trapp and the informant spotted a marked police van outside the NYPD's processing center for applicants on the 4th Avenue and 42nd Street. And Trapp allegedly crawled underneath. They say allegedly. There is a photo. Okay, fine. But there's a photo of a man underneath the police van while the surveillance team watched his every move. With the surveillance team in covert pursuit, Trapp allegedly expressed excitement after cutting the brake lines and wanted to look for more cars. Okay, there you go. He was going for more. But instead, he and the informant drove to the Occupy City Hall protest camp in Manhattan, where demonstrators call for the NYPD to be defunded. Trapp was arrested soon after returning to Brooklyn. So we have a photo here. An evidence photo shows the tampering underneath the NYPD van. Police say an anti-lock brake sensor had been severed, which could affect the handling of the vehicle. An inspection found that the police van's anti-lock brake sensor had been severed, which could affect the handling of the vehicle. The sensor line was right next to it and looked identical to it, the van's main brake line, according to police. At the time of Trapp's arrest, the role of the informant was not revealed, and police implied that officers had happened to catch him in the act. The federal complaint does not make clear whether the informant was someone who was previously a paid confidential source, or whether the person came forward to cooperate after hearing of Trapp's plans. Now that's interesting. Somebody may have been like, dude, this guy's nuts. Initially, Trapp was charged locally with criminal mischief and reckless endangerment and was released without bail the next day by a New York City judge. This is nuts. He literally he tried cutting the brake lines on an NYPD vehicle. Why are these people being released? On Wednesday, Trapp was ordered detained pending trial by U.S. Magistrate Judge M. Gold. It was unclear whether he had an attorney to speak on his behalf. Seriously, man, Trump, the feds, the FBI, they're the only ones doing anything about this. Local cops across the country are cutting these people loose for some reason. They say Trapp's alleged actions had potentially life-threatening consequences for NYPD officers and members of the public who could have been injured by the vehicle's brake failure, stated acting U.S. Attorney Seth D. Ducharme in a statement. The office will ensure that anyone who targets police officers or acts with the intent to undermine public safety efforts will face justice. Trapp faces up to 20 years in prison if convicted on the federal charges. They don't say what the federal charges are, just that he's been charged. Now we have this. This is the court document, which is United States against Jeremy Trapp, complaint and affidavit in support of application for arrest. David J. Williams makes the points. I don't know. Let's read a little bit of this. He says, I am a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation assigned to the Joint Terrorism Task Force. I have been a special agent for approximately 3 years. As a special agent, I've investigated numerous matters during the course of which I have conducted physical and electronic surveillance, interviewed witnesses, executed court-authorized search warrants, etc. It's just him talking about his resume. Beginning in late May 2020, thousands of people held large demonstrations in Brooklyn, New York, to protest the death of George Floyd. He goes on to say, during the demonstration, certain individuals and groups of individuals unlawfully obstructed the flow of vehicle traffic on city streets and refused lawful commands from the NYPD. Some individuals and groups of individuals vandalized vehicles and businesses with graffiti and by smashing the vehicles and windows of businesses with heavy objects. Some individuals and groups targeted the NYPD, assaulting officers, vandalizing their vehicles that had responded to the protest, and in some cases, attempting to gain access to NYPD station houses without authorization, thus interfering with and obstructing the NYPD's efforts. On or about July 11th or 12th, demonstrators proclaiming to be pro-law enforcement gathered in Diker Heights and Bay Ridge to express support for law enforcement in light of the George Floyd demonstrations. Other individuals confronted the proclaimed pro-law enforcement demonstrators, leading to violent clashes between some members of the two groups. He goes on to say, on July 13th, a group of demonstrators gathered outside the Brooklyn Criminal Court. The demonstrators were shouting at police officers and objecting to the arrest of individuals who had confronted the pro-law enforcement demonstrators in Bay Ridge. During the conversation, so this is when Jeremy Trapp spoke with an individual. During the conversation with a confidential source, Trapp stated the police were racist. He wanted to harm the officers and their supporters, and they had previously been involved in destroying property and burning police cars. So we know this stuff. I just want to move down to the point where the FBI gets involved, how they're justifying this. We can see this photo of a man under the NYPD vehicle. They say it's from NYPD surveillance. We can only assume that's actually the dude. Moving down, they show more of the photos. These are things we all covered. But here's the interesting part. The NYPD van is property of the NYPD and the New York City government. Both the NYPD and New York City government conduct business in interstate commerce. For instance, by purchasing vehicles and other equipment and supplies in interstate commerce. The activities of the NYPD and New York City government in enacting and enforcing laws also affects interstate commerce. The NYPD and the New York City government are also the recipients of financial assistance from the federal government, including grants from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. It sounds like that's the justification for federal involvement. Going on to say, wherefore, your deponent respectively requests that the defendant, Jeremy Trapp, be dealt with according to the law. And that's about it. Sworn to before me by telephone this 4th day of August, the Honorable Stephen M. Gold, United States Magistrate Judge, Eastern District of New York. We'll see how things play out. Now, just full disclosure, this guy was arrested initially on July 19th. They let him go. That to me is just absolutely insane. What we're dealing with now, only because of the actions of federal law enforcement, we're understanding now exactly what this guy was doing and the extent to which he was depraved and was trying to get people killed and wanted to snip the brake lines of multiple police vehicles. When you see the riots in Portland, when you see the riots across this country, keep in mind, this is surface level activity. What they're doing behind the scenes with organizing is way more extreme. Now, the far right. Yes, the far right is bad. Absolutely. Call them out every time you see them. You show me some far right attack and absolutely we will condemn them by name, calling out their organization, their beliefs. But these things happen few and far between. And when they do, we have a national outcry about it. It is not difficult for me or anyone else, and seemingly many Republicans, to decry far-right groups, notably the Klan and the other white supremacy organizations. You want to name them by all means. There have been individual actors. We name them too. However, often we try to avoid using their names specifically because they want the attention, but we will call them out specifically. The Democrats and the left seem not to be doing this. And so what ends up happening is it's left to these, the police. They're being attacked and ignored. Things seem to be getting worse. And I think it's because the backbone of our country is eroding. The strong, patriotic, pro-America ideas are gone. Look, they may be stronger than we realize, but at least as far as we're able to see, as far as the actions are going, it seems to be dwindling. The fervent zealotry is now on the far left that seeks to harm and destroy this country. I want to show you this article. Quote, "This is not going to lead to better outcomes for people of color. Black Portland police chief calls for violence to stop on 70th night of protest and more than 400 arrests since May." How did we come to this point where you have people going around trying to literally slashing tires, damaging police vehicles, cutting their brake lines? How did we come to this point? I don't know. I think the federal government is the only thing that's going to be able to stop this. The Portland police chief is calling for it to end because 400 people have been arrested, but they keep releasing these people. I mentioned Andy No earlier. Seriously, you can give him a follow. I saw that he posted about one of these Wall of Moms, fake activists. who was arrested for rioting and released right away. And what do? They go right back to doing it. This guy is only detained now because the feds got involved. Why? Seems like the backbone that made this country strong has been broken because the states don't care. They don't care about the crumbling of their cities. They don't care about it's impressive and it's worrisome. I say impressive, not in a good way. It's just like in the sense that it's like, wow, really? I can't even believe what I'm seeing. What we're seeing is that in states and cities, the mayors, the governors, they seem to just think, what do I got to say or do to get through this day so I can get my paycheck and go home and ignore everybody else? There's no more sense of duty. The people serving in the police department or the judges who are just releasing these people, it's insane. Maybe it's not the cops' fault. I don't know. But cops maybe are completely demoralized. And now it's come to the point where we have 400 arrests in Portland. If these 400 people were arrested since May and held without bail or bond, then would this be over? I wonder. I think the issue is they keep releasing them. They're organizing on Twitter. They're telling people to wear all black, and the cops don't know who they're engaging with. So they can tell these people, you can't come back out and do this. And then the far left, through their NPOs, fight back and say that's a violation of their rights. Then they show up and they keep rioting again. And this time someone else gets arrested. They come back out and they just keep doing it. There was a man that I just read to you about who literally tried cutting the brake lines of police vehicles, and he was released. What if he went and did it again? Did they think he would just stop? The feds intervened. That's why I bring up the Jake Paul stuff, and that's why I want to talk about this story. It seems like Donald Trump is holding true to his law and order stance. Bill Barr and the DOJ, the FBI, these organizations are seeking to, charge these individuals when the locals will not do it. That's the only way this stops. If the local police in Portland will not stop these people, if the local courts will not, and the federal courts have to do it, and maybe that's why they were so adamant, the far left, about attacking the federal courthouse. This country is being held together by thin strands as the states defy federal authority, reject anything the federal government wants to do, assert their sovereignty, finally, which is fine, but I'll point out, now all these Democrats are blaming Donald Trump for all the problems that we're seeing. They're blaming him for the civil unrest. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the reason NYPD releases these people is because they want the chaos to blame Trump. Maybe the reason in Seattle and Portland they're releasing these people is because they want to blame Trump. But I'll tell you what, Trump is the one standing up to them. Trump is the one sending out the feds. And the Portland police are begging for people to stop. But for whatever reason, it isn't. They don't have the support. They don't have the abilities. I don't know, man. Some new videos have just recently dropped about that woman in Portland. So reporting on this, I had this the rioters went to a woman's house. That's basically what happened. Now, I said I didn't know if it was her home or what was going on. But in new footage, you can see from people filming up close, she literally says, "This is my home. Get off my property." And they're saying no. There's one funny point where a guy says, "Get inside." And she's standing in her house with her door open. She says, "I am inside, you idiot." She was wearing a Nazi armband, for sure. And that's disgusting. And I don't know what the deal was. I think people who try to do this to antagonize the groups are stupid. Maybe she actually believes in that stuff. Whatever, man. I detest it. And I think she should be heavily criticized and denounced for wearing it. But they still went to her home. You want to go in your house, dress up like a clown and, and put up all the offensive imagery you want. You can do that in your house. And that's the point. But the riots are getting worse. The Portland police aren't stopping it. And begging is not a good look. Black Portland police chief calls for violence to stop. Sure, that's not going to do anything. No one's going to listen. No one cares. These people are being let go. And unless law enforcement comes in and actually arrests them and puts them in jail and says, you stay here now. Okay, you go to jail when you commit crimes. It'll just keep getting worse. They'll go to your homes. The reason I mentioned the woman at her house is because she was saying in a video up close, this is my home. So it's confirmed she was at her house and they went to her house. They targeted her. Are they going to arrest these people for this? No, they're probably not. And I'm telling you now, the morality police will come to your house. They went to her house because the armband she was wearing. Now, I can understand you might find it detestable and distasteful, and absolutely, I agree. But going to someone's house and attacking them, she was literally physically attacked by someone, by a couple people, I believe. They physically attacked her. This is where it's going too far. But this is what I think is going to happen. The police are letting these people out. It just keeps happening. And eventually they'll show up to your home. With the police in New York releasing people they arrested a bunch of people for protesting, dropped all the charges. Dallas, Fort Worth did the same thing. It's only a matter of time, like I've said before, where they'll come to your house, they'll commit some crimes, maybe they'll get arrested, and they'll get released right away. Eventually, the police are going to say, we can't deal with these groups, you're on your own, like they did in Seattle. So let me wrap this up for you. Did you see the letter that was sent out by the Seattle police saying, I'm sorry, we can't protect your businesses because the judges have constrained us? And then rioters from the far left went around smashing up businesses and stealing property. What's going to happen when that same order comes down in Portland and they're marching through residential neighborhoods and the police say, I'm sorry, we can't protect your homes because of the constraints by these judges? I am telling you, the reason why this story is so significant is that the NYPD cut loose. I'm going to say this dude was a terrorist trying to get cops killed, and the feds intervened. If not for them, this guy would be out on the street. So what happens when they start going house to house? You're not going to want to find out. But I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'm moving as far away from the city as I can, as soon as I can. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at YouTube, over at timcast.net. Do that. Go to timcast.net, and I will see you there at 4 p.m. Thanks for hanging out.